What's going on, guys? Doc Danny here with the PT Entrepreneur Podcast. It's almost 2018, and I've got a challenge for you. I'm doing a 2018 goal challenge, and I want to help you set and achieve the biggest goal you can think of for 2018. So January 8th, the goal setting challenge starts. And if you want in on this, you need to go to my Instagram page. So go to Danny Mattei PT. That's DANNYMATTA PT. And Instagram, and go to the link in my bio and get signed up for this goal setting challenge. It's going to be a 3-part challenge. Over 3 days, I'm going to send you a different video. I'll show you how to pre-plan to set your goals, to organize setting your goals, and then how to make it real and actually achieve that goal that you're trying to achieve in 2018. And this is a challenge, so that means there's going to be a winner. And the rules to this are in the page on my Instagram link. And the winner of this challenge is going to get a 1-hour strategy session with me to really help them dial in their 2018 goal. So guys, I hope that you sign up. I'd love to help you be as successful as possible in 2018. And as always, thanks for listening to the PT Entrepreneur Podcast.
So here's the question. How do physical therapists like us, who don't want to see 30 patients a day, who don't want to work home health, and have real student loans, create a career and life for ourselves that we've always dreamed about? This is the question, and this podcast is the answer. My name's Danny Mattei, and welcome to the PT Entrepreneur Podcast.
What's going on, guys? Dr. Danny here with the PT Entrepreneur Podcast. And if my voice sounds a little different, that's because I got a little bit of a head cold from my 2 kiddos that are both in school now. And if you know anything about little kids and them being in school, it's that they breed disease everywhere they go, and they wipe snot on each other, and they cough in each other's faces. And so I've been affected by this a little bit. So if my voice sounds a little different, that's what's going on. But we'll keep rolling on because we don't want to miss one of these podcasts, and it's a Thursday podcast, so it's going to be relatively short. And I have something interesting I want to talk about. I had a student come and shadow me last week in clinic, and he goes to a school here in Atlanta. And at the end of the block of patients we had, it was kind of a quick day because I had to run to the bank and do some stuff. But we started chatting about kind of the idea of cash PT versus in-network, and working for somebody else versus yourself. And what I thought was interesting was he said many of his classmates, they have this perception that cash physical therapy is greedy. And I thought that was interesting because, he said it's just the idea that, you say you don't want to take somebody's insurance. It's kind of, their perception is that it's greedy. And, and I don't know if that is common or maybe that's just with students. I'm not sure. And I thought back to whenever I started my cash practice, and I definitely didn't think it was something that was greedy. I just thought it was something that was definitely different. And there would probably be a certain subset of people that would never, ever want to go to a cash practice, right? So, and that's definitely the case. But, what I said back to him was, look, if I wanted to start a practice that made the most amount of money for myself, it would not be a cash practice. It just wouldn't be, because the numbers do not justify that in the least, right? And I'll give you a good example. Many people, I don't think, know this, but we were offered to be potentially acquired by a much larger practice last year, and they are insurance-based practice, right? So they looked at our numbers, we got to look at their numbers and decide if it was a good fit, and we just didn't think that it was. We didn't know how our patient population would respond to that. They didn't know how our patient population would respond to that, and we decided not to go forward with merging or them acquiring us. But we definitely, looked at each other pretty good in terms of the potential ability for that to happen. And in looking at their numbers, what I saw was, and this wasn't even that high of a volume practice, and that's one of the reasons that we actually thought about potentially doing it. They were averaging about 45 to 50 patients a week, but the revenue generated by the average PT in that type of a practice was about $310,000 a year. Okay, so the average person working for them generates about $310,000 a year in revenue for the practice. In an average cash practice, you're probably looking at somewhere in the range of $200,000 in terms of a PT being able to generate X amount of revenue. It's probably closer to $200,000 for a cash practice. So it's 2/3 of what you can generate in a cash practice versus an insurance practice. So why would you do that if your whole goal was just to make as much money as possible? You wouldn't go that route, first of all. It would be it's way more challenging to go out of network or do a cash practice. You do it because you have an idea of how you want to work with people. You have these standards of how you want to treat people, of how you want people to see your practice, of how you want to interact with them, and it has nothing to do with being greedy in the least. And what's greedy is these really big insurance-based practices that are owned by private equity firms, which are many of them, which private equity is basically private money that's pulled together to buy companies, and they go into portfolios for returns based on these companies, and they can come from revenue from the company or sales or whatever. It's huge amounts of money that are pulled together to buy companies or property, and then that money gets redistributed to the partners in that, or the investors, based on the amount of revenue that they gain. So if a clinic is bought, they try to create as much revenue as they possibly can and have the lowest possible expenses. And what that typically means is you're going to see 15 to 25 people a day, and you're going to bill X amount of units of whatever the hell it is, and you're going to generate us $300,000 to $400,000 in revenue, and then we're going to pay you $60,000. That is the model of a greedy, unethical individual, in my opinion. And the thought process of a student to think of a cash practice as being greedy is really, it's just misinformed. And what they probably don't understand is that when they take a job working for one of these big companies, they're frankly being used. They're being used to generate massive amounts of revenue and get paid very little, versus the people that we employ will make more money than a starting PT does at one of these practices for sure, and they're not generating us nearly as much. And it comes down to the fact that we look at this from an ethical standpoint, from a standpoint of what's best for the patient, and it has nothing to do with how we can generate the most amount of revenue. Now, we have to generate enough revenue to be a profitable business, and that's great, and you can, and that's important, because you don't want to have to shut your clinic down because you didn't generate enough revenue. You don't go into business to lose money. But there's in my opinion, an ethical way and non-ethical way, and a lot of people have issues with money too. Here's the other thing: many PTs have never had to accept money from anybody for what they do. And many of them would do what they do for a living for free if they could, because we're just nice people. We like to fucking help people. That's what we do. But you can't do that and put food on the table for your family, right? So you have to have a job where somebody pays you. Well, when you own a cash practice, it's very black and white. It's, I did this. That's what it costs. You pay me this. It's very transparent. And for many people, they like that quite a bit, because they know, oh, okay, I just owe this. I'm not going to get a bill 3 months later for some stuff that happened that I didn't even know I was going to have to pay for, right? So, but people are very hung up with money and they have their own issues with it. And for them to perceive, oh man, I don't want to take money to help this person with their back pain. Well, dude, that's your profession. That's what you do. That's your expertise. It'd be like an accountant saying, oh, I don't want to take your money to help you save whatever, X amount of money on your taxes or not get audited or whatever. Like they may really enjoy that, but that's how they feed their family. That's how they pay their mortgage, right? So, it interests me whenever I heard that. I was kind of shocked that somebody would think that was a greedy approach for physical therapy. And, the reality is it's just not the case. And if you want to make a lot of money and you want to not be able to sleep at night, open a high volume insurance-based practice and get some young new grad, I should say, to just see a massive amount of patients and just grind them into the ground for about a year and a half till they get fed up with it and they leave and they go somewhere else and have huge turnover. That's how you can make a lot of money if you would like to do that. If you want to sleep at night, you want to make a good living and create really good relationships with people in your community, and get to a point where you can employ other people to then enjoy their job just as much as you do. A cash practice or an out-of-network practice or a hybrid practice, like Brandon Vaughn, the guy we just talked to on the podcast. It's a buddy of mine in Columbia, South Carolina. Still seeing people in that volume. And you know what? He's leaving a lot of money on the table by treating people the right way. So if you want to sleep at night and you want to feel good about yourself and you actively develop a company where people want to work there and you do the right thing for them, then a cash practice, out-of-network practice, or hybrid practice is probably going to be your best bet. All right, guys. Till next time, take care.
Hey, real quick before we go, I just want to say thanks so much for listening to this podcast. If you're one of the people that's already headed over to iTunes and left me a review, I really appreciate it. There's been over 50 iTunes reviews, and all of them being 5 stars, that have been left on this podcast since we started in August. That's awesome. And I read every single review. I take every little piece of advice that you give me in there, any criticism, any positive feedback that you have, I read all of it. And it's amazing to see that we're even getting reviews internationally at this point. So if you're one of the people that's reviewed the podcast, thanks so much. If you're an active listener of this podcast, I highly, highly encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and go to iTunes and leave me a short review. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and it really does help me get this information in front of more people. So guys, thanks again for your time and keep listening.